In this video, we're going to dive deep of the Family Guy Iceberg Explained to Fall Asleep To. And our journey begins right at the very start of the series, peeling back the layers of the pilot episode. Our journey begins with Season 1, Episode 1, where we witness the fundamental, often unsettling, dynamics that will define the Griffin family for decades to come. After a brief, satirical look at television sitcoms, we are introduced to Meg, sitting at the kitchen table, expressing a desire for collagen lip injections. This early moment immediately establishes Meg's deep-seated insecurities and her constant, often futile, quest for external validation, a theme that will tragically echo throughout her existence in Quahog. Lois, ever the well-meaning but often ineffective mother, dismisses the idea, stating that poor self-image is the root of most of the world's problems, a comment that ironically cuts to the core of many characters in the show. It's in this same scene that we get our very first glimpse into the mind of Stewie Griffin, a mere one-year-old meticulously working on a blue and yellow ray gun. He calmly explains that it is a mind control device, nearing completion. When Lois, completely oblivious to the sinister implications, takes the toy away, Stewie's true nature explodes into full view. He declares, "Damn you, vile woman. You've impeded my work since the day I escaped from your wretched womb." He even calls his birth my victory day, the fruition of my deeply laid plans to escape from that cursed ovarian Bastille. This initial exchange isn't just a funny baby gag, it's a foundational piece of lore, solidifying Stewie's unyielding, almost cosmic hatred for Lois and his grand ambitions for world domination, all within the innocent facade of infancy. He even warns her, "Mark my words, when you least expect it, your comeuppance will come." Meanwhile, Peter, the patriarch, demonstrates his own brand of destructive irresponsibility. Despite promising Lois he wouldn't drink at a stag party, he immediately participates in a beer-chugging contest, rationalizing his broken promise. This leads to him getting spectacularly drunk, resulting in a severe hangover the next morning. His negligence carries over into his work at Happy-Go-Lucky Toys Inc., where he falls asleep on the job, allowing clearly dangerous items like a knife, a gasoline can, and a porcupine to pass unchecked on the conveyor belt. This predictably leads to children being harmed and Peter getting fired, setting the stage for the family's immediate financial crisis. Rather than confessing his firing to Lois, Peter attempts a series of disastrous lies, claiming she's getting kind of fat as a distraction, further illustrating his inability to face consequences directly. When Brian advises him to tell Lois the truth about his joblessness, Peter, in a moment of desperate inspiration, decides to commit welfare fraud. He intentionally misreads a check for $150 as $150,000, indulging in ludicrous purchases like a moat for the house, hiring a jester, and getting Meg the collagen lip injections she always wanted, along with breast implants for Chris. This reckless act of deception and extravagance ultimately leads to his arrest after Lois discovers the truth from the mail carrier. The climax arrives in the courtroom, where Peter is on trial for welfare fraud. Lois delivers a surprisingly heartfelt speech about her love for Peter, despite his many flaws, which moves the judge. However, the judge still sentences Peter to 24 months in prison, and then, in a twist, sentences Lois to join him, stating that she must share the burden of his actions. Just as this devastating reality sets in, a bizarre sequence unfolds. The Kool-Aid Man bursts through the courtroom wall, only to retreat slowly. Then, from the gallery, Stewie appears, still in his blue onesie, and zaps the judge with his mind control ray. The judge, now under Stewie's influence, immediately releases Peter and reinstates his job at the toy factory. This shocking intervention from Stewie, though seemingly benevolent, is a chilling reminder of his constant, hidden power, pulling strings in the background to serve his own inscrutable purposes, even if it means temporarily aiding his despised mother. The episode concludes with Peter, back home, already planning his next dubious financial scheme, a minority scholarship application, afro wig and all. This pilot episode is a masterclass in establishing the core, often dark, elements of Family Guy's lore. It shows us Stewie's profound and persistent malevolence, hidden beneath a baby's exterior, capable of wielding advanced technology and manipulating reality itself. It paints Peter as a deeply flawed, irresponsible, yet strangely resilient figure, whose bad decisions are often driven by a childlike desire for instant gratification and an aversion to consequences. And it hints at the systemic dysfunction of the entire Griffin family, where Meg's suffering is a running gag, Chris is easily swayed, and Lois is left to pick up the pieces, often unknowingly aided or hindered by Stewie's silent machinations. This initial dive into Quahog's world reveals that even from day one, Family Guy was never just a simple sitcom, but a complex, often disturbing, tapestry of character flaws and hidden agendas. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to help the channel grow. Now, let's continue. Stewie's immediate, direct threats against Lois in the pilot quickly established his core motivations. Our journey continues with Season 2, Episode 3, where we explore a deviation from his usual nefarious plans, a moment that, by its very nature, underscores the relentless intensity of his ongoing war against his mother. The episode opens on December 31st, 1999, with the Griffin family caught in the widespread Y2K panic. Peter, convinced the world is ending, takes extreme measures, gathering vast amounts of survival supplies and dismissing his neighbor's skepticism. He even locks Lois and the children in the basement, forcing them into hazmat suits to weather what he believes will be a global technological collapse. In this confined, chaotic environment, Stewie is present, notably wearing a Baby New Year sash, a symbolic marker of new beginnings, perhaps an ironic contrast to the impending doom Peter envisions. As the New Year's countdown plays on a small television, the family watches in horror as the broadcast depicts planes crashing and nuclear explosions around the world, signaling a total societal breakdown. The episode then plunges into a bizarre, post-apocalyptic future. Spooner Street is destroyed. Lois cooks over a barrel fire using a license plate, and even their neighbors, Cleveland and Quagmire, have fused into a single, grotesque entity called Quahog. In this desolate landscape, Peter's extreme actions continue, from force-feeding a celebrity on television to inflating like a balloon after consuming an entire box of dehydrated food and water. The family's journey through this ruined world is filled with disturbing encounters, including finding news anchors Tom Tucker and Diane Simmons cannibalizing their colleague, Trisha Takanawa, and a terrifying face-off with a Mad Max-style gang, which they resolve through a game of Family Feud. The family eventually finds refuge in a Twinkie factory built into a mountain, a sugary utopia where they and other survivors rebuild a town, establishing New Quahog. Peter, naturally, becomes mayor for life, but his authority quickly devolves into tyranny, leading the townspeople to revolt and chase the Griffins out once more. The climax of this harrowing saga sees the family, exhausted and displaced again, contemplating their next destination, a Carvel factory. However, the true revelation of this episode and its connection to Stewie's deeper lore comes with its abrupt and unexpected conclusion. The entire post-apocalyptic narrative, with all its horrors and absurdities, is revealed to be a dream of Pam, a character from the live-action television show Dallas. Bobby Ewing is then seen in the shower, a classic television trope for resetting a season's events. This meta-narrative twist is crucial. In this dream world, Stewie is not actively engaged in his relentless plots against Lois. He is simply a baby, a participant in the family's shared struggle for survival, a victim of Peter's paranoia. The absence of his usual malevolent genius in such a chaotic setting is striking. It suggests that his deep-seated psychological warfare against Lois is so intrinsically tied to the canonical reality of Family Guy that its suspension, even for a single episode, renders the entire experience an anomaly, something not real. This episode, therefore, serves as a powerful counterpoint, a what-if scenario where Stewie's primary obsession is momentarily sidelined. It subtly reinforces the idea that his relentless plots are a fundamental, almost immutable aspect of his character within the true Family Guy universe, always ongoing beneath the surface, even if they sometimes take a back seat to broader, more absurd narratives. The dream sequence, by temporarily removing him from his core mission, inadvertently highlights just how central that mission is to his identity. The previous episode's exploration of a dream world underscored the canonical importance of Stewie's core antagonism. Our journey continues with Season 2, Episode 21, where the narrative delves into the bizarre and often disturbing origins of Peter Griffin himself, hinting at a primal, almost untamed lineage that explains much of his chaotic behavior. The episode opens with the family attempting to do spring cleaning, a chore Peter vehemently resists, recalling a ludicrous flashback where he was fired as a bounty spokesman for trying to clean up his pee with paper towels. Lois, however, is insistent, and during the cleaning of the dusty basement, she finds Meg's baby booties, bronzed hat, and then, inexplicably, mentions her tail. Meg's shocked reaction and Lois's quick dismissal of the comment as nothing is a subtle, yet deeply unsettling, hint at a hidden, possibly non-human, aspect of Meg's, and by extension, Peter's genetic past. Meanwhile, Peter, Chris, and Cleveland engage in a destructive attempt to clean the house exterior using a fire hydrant, which results in flooding the house and blasting Brian out a window. With Lois ordering them away from the house, Peter, Chris, and Cleveland join Joe and his son Kevin for a camping trip. Chris quickly falls victim to his own bizarre tendencies, covering himself in honey and being carried away by ants, prompting Peter to casually mention he does the same at home with Velveeta and cockroaches. This paints a picture of Chris as a character whose odd behaviors are not just random gags, but deeply ingrained, almost ritualistic patterns. Back at home, Stewie, in a moment that highlights his infant-like impulses alongside his advanced intellect, is found making a papier-mâché model boat from Brian's first edition books, gleefully eating paste and describing it as quite delicious, almost worth the ensuing bowel obstruction. When Brian confronts him, Stewie, with manipulative cunning, feigns fear and jumps into Lois's arms, claiming Brian is scary. This scene perfectly encapsulates Stewie's dual nature, an intelligent, scheming baby who can also effortlessly revert to innocent helplessness to evade consequences. He even boasts about using Brian's Dostoevsky to make a fort, further rubbing salt into Brian's intellectual wounds. Later, Lois takes Stewie for a checkup, a seemingly mundane event that quickly turns dark. Stewie, initially charming Dr. Hartman, becomes terrified when the nurse brings out a large, sparkling needle for his immunizations. In a shocking display of his inherent aggression and tactical thinking, he jumps onto the nurse and holds a tongue depressor to her throat, threatening to give her a series of splinters that could, become infected. This isn't just a baby throwing a tantrum. It's a calculated act of violence, revealing a primitive, dangerous instinct that lies just beneath his sophisticated vocabulary. Lois, once again, distracts him with a dancing kitty, finger puppet, allowing Dr. Hartman to administer the shot. The most profound and disturbing layer of this episode, however, is revealed during Stewie's fever-induced hallucination following his immunization. In this surreal vision, his crib floats in a sea of blue water. Bluebirds transform into Mr. T-birds, and he is chased by a shark fin, which turns out to be a giant Meg's nose. The hallucination culminates with giant Meg claiming, "I am taking your brain. You are now my slave." This isn't merely a fever dream. It's a symbolic manifestation of Stewie's deepest, most primal fear, the loss of control, the subjugation of his intellect, particularly at the hands of the very family members he despises or manipulates. The image of Meg, a character he often dismisses as a monstrous, brain-stealing entity, speaks volumes about his underlying anxieties regarding his family's influence and his own vulnerability, however rarely shown. The episode's subtle hints about Meg's tail and Peter's almost animalistic behaviors, combined with Stewie's raw, violent instincts and his fear of mental subjugation, suggest a profound, almost evolutionary, link to a more primitive past. It implies that the Griffin family, particularly Peter and his children, carry within them a legacy of untamed urges and hidden, uncomfortable truths about their origins, challenging the veneer of suburban normalcy. This deep dive into their primal undercurrents serves as a disturbing foundation for understanding their often inexplicable actions and the chaotic world they inhabit. The dreamlike reality of the previous episode and the hints of Peter's primal origins remind us that beneath the surface, even the most absurd Family Guy narratives often conceal deeper truths. Our journey continues with Season 3, Episode 1, where we witness Brian's dramatic descent into drug addiction, a stark and unsettling exploration of his vulnerabilities and the consequences of his quest for meaning. The episode opens with Brian expressing profound disillusionment to his therapist, Dr. Bruce. He feels trapped in a rut, bored with life, confessing he's watched the Behind the Music special on Leif Garrett 18 times. Dr. Bruce suggests volunteer work, an idea Brian initially embraces, but their session ends abruptly and awkwardly when Brian makes an inappropriate comment about Dr. Bruce's daughter, the new receptionist. This initial scene immediately establishes Brian's internal struggle with purpose and his tendency to seek external solutions for internal emptiness. Brian's attempts at volunteer work are a disaster. As a guide dog for a blind man, he walks his charge directly into a movie ticket booth and then provides a disinterested, unhelpful commentary during a screening of what sounds like the Blair Witch Project. Later, at a nursing home, an elderly woman named Pearl, in immense pain, begs Brian to pull the plug on her life support. He nearly complies, only for Pearl to reveal it was a test, calling him twisted when he reacts angrily. These failures highlight Brian's inability to find fulfillment through conventional altruism, underscoring his growing desperation for meaning. Meanwhile, at the Happy-Go-Lucky Toys Company picnic, Peter participates in a chaotic catch-the-greased-up deaf guy contest, a bizarre and dangerous event. The ultimate prize for the picnic's final contest is a week's paid vacation, which Mr. Weed announces will go to the last person standing in a tranquilizer dart hunt. Peter, despite his initial enthusiasm, is eventually tranquilized by Mr. Weed, revealing his inherent susceptibility to absurd, often painful situations. Brian's life takes a dramatic turn when Joe recruits him to the police force, hoping his keen sense of smell can aid in drug enforcement. Brian proves to be a natural, accurately discerning Quagmire's recent activities in Manila with disturbing detail, much to Quagmire's horror. This new role provides Brian with the rush he's been seeking. During a bust at the airport, he tackles a suspect, and in a deeply unsettling moment, licks white powder off the floor, instantly recognizing it as cocaine and feeling an exhilarating high. This moment marks his rapid, almost instantaneous addiction. His new addiction immediately changes his personality. At home, he's sharp and perceptive, noticing Lois's toast and Meg's new conditioner, even correctly identifying Stewie's need for a diaper change. However, his enthusiasm quickly spirals into reckless behavior. He leads Joe on a bust of a Sunday school class, only to discover a hidden room where midgets are processing drugs. After a chaotic fight, Brian, now clearly under the influence, insists on taking the confiscated cocaine to evidence himself, only to disappear into the men's room with it. The effects of the cocaine are swift and devastating. Brian returns home gaunt, jittery, and aggressive, smoking and insulting the family. He brings a prostitute named Tina home, continues to hurl aggressive, paranoid rants at Lois, and is dismissive and cruel to Meg and Chris. His once sharp wit is now laced with hostility, and his calm demeanor is replaced by a frantic, self-destructive energy. He even knocks over a family picture frame as he leaves with Tina, a symbolic act of his detachment from the very family he once valued. The family, recognizing the severity of his addiction, stages an intervention with Dr. Bruce. Though the transcript jumps, we see Meg attempting to express her feelings, highlighting the emotional toll Brian's behavior is taking on everyone. During a therapy session with Peter and a counselor, Brian initially defends Peter, stating that Peter treated me like family and is his best friend. However, the counselor identifies Peter as a degenerate and a negative influence, suggesting that Brian's close relationship with Peter has contributed to his downfall. In a moment of defiant clarity, Brian declares his therapy complete, asserting that he came to get clean and has done so. The episode culminates with a welcome home Brian party, where Lois sings about his recovery. Despite the celebratory atmosphere, Brian makes a profound decision. He acknowledges that we're all responsible for our own destiny and announces he is leaving the family. He states, "I have to, Peter. For me. I love you all." He walks out the door, leaving the family in shock. Stewie, in a rare display of genuine emotion, toddles after him, crying, then spits on the ground in disgust as Brian drives away in a taxi, uttering a poignant "to be continued." This episode is a disturbing exploration of Brian's deep-seated existential angst and his susceptibility to addiction. His journey from boredom to drug-induced chaos, and finally to a radical decision to abandon his family for self-discovery, reveals a character far more complex and vulnerable than his intellectual facade often suggests. It challenges the idealized image of the loyal family dog, exposing the profound personal demons that drive him and the painful consequences of his search for identity and purpose. This is not just a comedic arc. It's a tragic narrative of self-destruction and a desperate, lonely quest for meaning, making us wonder if true recovery is ever possible for a character so deeply entrenched in his own internal struggles. Brian's painful journey of self-discovery and addiction in the previous episode highlighted the deep-seated vulnerabilities within the Griffin family. Our journey continues with Season 4, Episode 4, where we delve into the tragic and often disturbing depths of Meg Griffin's insecurity and her desperate, almost primal quest for acceptance and validation. The episode immediately thrusts us into Meg's world of social agony at James Woods Regional High School. She and her friends are admiring a boy named Craig Hoffman, who one friend describes as such a rebel. In a twisted fantasy sequence, Meg imagines a romantic picnic with a dead body by train tracks, where a wolf drags away the body's leg, and Meg comments, "You're so good with animals." This disturbing fantasy reveals the extreme, almost morbid extent of Meg's longing for connection and her distorted perception of what constitutes an ideal partner or relationship. When she gathers the courage to ask Craig out, he brutally rejects her, stating, "I don't go out with dudes," a crushing blow to her already fragile self-esteem. Distraught, Meg returns home and directly asks her parents if she is ugly. Peter, with his characteristic insensitivity, replies, "Well, he's a sharp kid. You might be ugly," sending Meg into tears. Stewie, in his high chair, observes her suffering with chilling enjoyment, muttering, "Yes, yes, your anguish sustains me." This moment underscores Stewie's consistent sadism towards Meg, viewing her pain as a source of perverse pleasure, a recurring theme that highlights the emotional abuse she endures even from her infant brother. Lois, in an attempt to comfort Meg, offers to take her shopping for new clothes, including low-rider jeans. Stewie's internal reaction is one of utter disgust, as he repeatedly beats a thought bubble of Meg in such attire with a rolling pin until it dissipates, emphasizing his revulsion at the idea of Meg attempting to be attractive or popular. Meanwhile, Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe discover that their favorite bar, the Drunken Clam, is for sale due to a new megamall putting Horace, the owner, out of business. Their attempts to renovate the bar in a montage are a chaotic disaster, leaving the place in an even worse state. This subplot serves as a comedic counterpoint to Meg's struggles, showcasing the men's own brand of ineptitude and their desperate attempts to cling to familiar comforts, much like Meg clings to the hope of acceptance. Later, at the Mega Mall, Lois volunteers Meg for a news makeover segment. Meg, transformed with blonde hair and a stylish outfit, finally experiences the validation she craves. She walks through her high school halls, turning heads, and even Craig Hoffman, who previously rejected her, now approaches her to ask her out. The popular girls, led by Connie D'Amico, invite her to hang out. This sudden popularity, however, is fleeting and superficial, built entirely on external changes rather than genuine connection. The men, having failed to save the drunken clam, decide to form a rock band, initially performing karaoke versions of classic songs like Don't Stop Believin'. Their raw, unpolished energy, surprisingly, draws a crowd, leading to a record deal with a man who identifies himself as Jimmy Iovine after a chaotic performance at the Rhode Island State Penitentiary. The family band, now named Meg and the Griffins, experiences a meteoric rise to fame. However, Meg's newfound fame comes at a steep price. The music producer, Dr. Diddy, insists on focusing on Meg's sex appeal. Peter, blinded by the allure of success, readily agrees to exploit his daughter, despite Lois's visible concerns. This decision by Peter is a deeply disturbing moment, highlighting his willingness to compromise his daughter's well-being for personal gain and fame. Meg, desperate for any form of acceptance, even asserts her desire to be exploited, a heartbreaking statement that speaks volumes about her profound lack of self-worth. The climax of Meg's exploitation occurs when she is invited to Jimmy Fallon's dressing room during their Saturday Night Live performance. Peter and Lois watch in horror from the green room as the Saturday Night Live opening features a video of Meg and Jimmy Fallon having sex. Meg returns to the green room, crying, finally realizing she was used. Peter, in a rare moment of fatherly protection, becomes enraged and goes on stage to beat up Jimmy Fallon. The episode concludes with the family back home, with Meg returning to her original look and expressing relief at being the real me again. The final unsettling revelation is that the entire living room scene is a set, and the entire cast, including the prisoners and Jimmy Fallon, takes a bow in front of a live audience. This meta-commentary suggests that Meg's suffering, and indeed the entire Griffin family's existence, is a performance, a spectacle for an unseen audience, further emphasizing the cyclical, inescapable nature of her trauma within the show's universe. This episode is a profound, albeit darkly comedic, exploration of Meg's enduring pain, her desperate search for acceptance, her willingness to be exploited, and her ultimate realization of being used, paints a picture of a character perpetually trapped in a cycle of rejection and self-loathing. The show uses her as a punching bag, not just for laughs, but to comment on societal pressures, the exploitation of young women, and the devastating impact of parental neglect. Meg's story here is a deep, often tragic, dive into the uncomfortable truths of being an outcast, revealing the hidden depths of her quiet desperation. Meg's desperate quest for acceptance and the tragic exploitation she endured painted a bleak picture of her place in the family dynamic. Our journey continues with Season 4, Episode 27, where we delve into the utterly bizarre and often disturbing lineage of Peter Griffin, a family history so strange it almost explains his own chaotic and unpredictable nature. The episode opens with Peter and Lois in bed, where Peter resists brushing his teeth, leading to a comedic struggle that is abruptly interrupted by the sound of burglars downstairs. Peter, armed with a baseball bat, leads Lois into the hallway. In a moment of pure, unthinking instinct, he immediately hits Meg with the bat when she suddenly appears, knocking her out. This quick, almost reflexive act of violence against Meg, even in a crisis, is a disturbing if darkly comedic testament to her role as the family's perpetual victim. The family retreats into a high-tech panic room Peter has built in the attic, an idea he got from the movie The Butterfly Effect, which he found terrible. Once inside, they realize there's no phone, and as panic sets in, Peter decides to pass the time by recounting the history of the Griffin family, a narrative that becomes increasingly outlandish and revealing. Peter's version of history begins with a cutaway gag of the Big Bang, caused by God arm wrestling his roommate, and then igniting a fart. He then traces the Griffin lineage through prehistoric times, featuring dinosaur-like versions of the family, until a meteor strike causes an ice age. The story then moves to cavemen, where a caveman, Peter invents the wheel with the help of a scantily clad cavewoman Lois, and a cave baby Stewie hits Lois with a club, showing that some family dynamics are truly ancient. The historical journey continues with Moses Griffin, a Peter-like figure leading the Jews out of Egypt, presenting his own personal rules as the Ten Commandments. Back in the panic room, with the burglars still downstairs, Brian suggests Meg could fit through the vent to get help. Peter, without hesitation, shoves her in, despite her protests. The family then watches on the security monitors as the burglars capture Meg. When Lois corrects them over the intercom that Meg is their daughter, not their son, Peter remains unconcerned, highlighting his casual disregard for Meg's safety. Peter then launches into the story of Nate Griffin, an African ancestor who was captured by slave traders. On the slave ship, Nate pranks the captain, and later, on a southern plantation, falls in love with the owner's daughter, Lois. After a chaotic escape on the Underground Railroad, Nate invents the DMV out of revenge, deliberately making it unhelpful. This segment, while absurd, touches on themes of racial injustice and the invention of bureaucratic frustration, filtered through Peter's unique perspective. As the panic room begins to flood due to Peter firing a flare gun, he attempts to escape in a scuba suit, only to find the tank filled with Tony Danza's breath. He then tells the story of his great-grandfather, Willie Black Eye Griffin, a silent movie star whose career ends with the advent of sound due to his high-pitched voice, and who is eventually stabbed to death. This adds a layer of tragicomic failure to the Griffin ancestry. The room continues to flood, and the family gets into a heated argument with Peter because he confesses he did not care for the Godfather. In a quick cutaway, we see Meg on the couch with the burglars, who are now repulsed by her advances, a callback to her enduring struggle for acceptance, even in the most dangerous of circumstances. Peter's final, and perhaps most disturbing, historical account is that of his great-uncle, Peter Hitler, who constantly annoys his brother, Adolf. During a rally, Peter acts as a hype man for Hitler, and later, while trying to cheer him up, accidentally shoots both Adolf Hitler and his mistress, Eva Braun. This deeply uncomfortable segment satirizes the banality of evil and injects Peter's buffoonery into one of history's darkest chapters, implying a strange, almost fated, connection between the Griffins and historical absurdity. Finally, the panic room door bursts open, washing the family out into the attic, where Joe and other police officers rescue them. The burglars are caught, but Joe reveals that they are pressing sexual harassment charges against Meg, a final cruel twist that perfectly encapsulates her tragic fate. The family, relieved to be safe, waves goodbye as the police take Meg away, showing their immediate return to normalcy, while Meg once again bears the brunt of the chaos. This episode is a profound, if unsettling, dive into the lore of Peter Griffin's family tree, revealing a lineage filled with absurdity, incompetence, and a strange, almost genetic, predisposition to chaos. From cavemen to silent film stars, and even to a connection with Adolf Hitler, Peter's ancestors mirror his own bizarre traits. The episode suggests that Peter's unpredictable nature isn't just a character quirk, but a deeply ingrained, almost evolutionary, characteristic passed down through generations. It's a comedic, yet disturbing, exploration of destiny and the inescapable traits that define a family, hinting that the Griffins are, in many ways, a product of their own ridiculously chaotic history. The exploration of Peter's bizarre lineage and Meg's enduring suffering revealed how deeply flawed the Griffin family truly is. Our journey continues with Season 5, Episode 9, an episode that, while seemingly a lighthearted Road to adventure, unveils a surprisingly vulnerable side of Stewie and the profound emotional attachment he has to his teddy bear, Rupert. The episode opens with a yard sale at the Griffin house. Amidst Peter's typical antics, like setting up an anvil trap that backfires on him, and Herbert's creepy interactions with Chris, a pivotal event occurs. Lois complains to Brian about a DVD titled Stymie Griffin, The Untold Story, which she calls a ripoff. While she's distracted, a man approaches Brian and buys Stewie's beloved teddy bear, Rupert, for a mere $1. Stewie soon appears at the table, realizes Rupert is missing, and immediately descends into a panic, shouting Rupert's name and imagining grim scenarios of kidnapping or death. Stewie's reaction is deeply revealing. He envisions a parody of Spock's funeral from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where he delivers a tearful eulogy for Rupert on a Starship Enterprise-like bridge. Brian, in a Scottish kilt, plays Amazing Grace on bagpipes as Rupert is launched into space, striking a barren planet and causing it to burst into new life. This elaborate fantasy underscores the immense emotional significance Rupert holds for Stewie, portraying him not just as a toy, but as a companion of cosmic importance, a friend for whom he would mourn with profound, almost operatic, grief. Meanwhile, Peter's recklessness is on full display. After buying Evel Knievel-style gloves, he attempts to jump a line of parked cars in the family station wagon, resulting in a fiery, spectacular crash. Joe Swanson arrives to revoke Peter's license, leading to a comedic struggle where Peter playfully keeps the license out of Joe's reach until Joe, angered, strikes him with his nightstick. Bored without his license, Peter attempts to create his own sitcom in his head, a bizarre parody titled My Black Son, starring himself and Emmanuel Lewis, further illustrating his self-indulgent escapism. Back at home, Stewie, dazed and surrounded by a spilled bottle of NyQuil, drunkenly mistakes a throw pillow for a cat before breaking down in tears. Brian, witnessing Stewie's distress, takes him to a toy store to get a replacement bear. Stewie, however, is furious and refuses any substitute. Brian confesses that he accidentally sold Rupert at the yard sale. Stewie's reaction is explosive. He attacks Brian, collapses in sobs, and then angrily berates him, highlighting the depth of his attachment and the genuine pain of loss he experiences. Stewie, with his advanced intellect, uses DNA from the dollar bill to track Rupert's new owner. He and Brian embark on a cross-country journey, hitchhiking and eventually using a helicopter, which they pay for by Stewie performing a captivating song and dance number, rotoscoped into a classic Gene Kelly scene from Anchors Away. This sequence, while visually stunning, showcases Stewie's unexpected talent and resourcefulness when driven by intense emotion. Their journey is fraught with peril, including a helicopter crash in the snowy mountains of Colorado. Upon arriving in Aspen, they locate Rupert's new owner, a man whose son is now playing with the bear. The man refuses to return Rupert. Stewie, ever the strategist, notices the man's skiing trophies and challenges him to a ski-off. Rupert for Brian. The man agrees, setting the stage for a dramatic climax. Concurrently, Peter and Meg share a rare, heartwarming moment. Peter's license is returned, and in a moment of genuine affection, he acknowledges he has a really wonderful daughter. However, this tenderness is fleeting. Peter immediately reverts to his usual mean-spirited self, pouring lemonade on Meg. This brief, almost cruel return to form for Peter, after a period of unusual bonding with Meg, serves as a harsh reminder of the deeply ingrained dynamics within the Griffin family, and Meg's perpetual role as the target of Peter's thoughtless cruelty. The episode's climax is the ski race, where Stewie's determination to reclaim Rupert is pitted against the new owner. Though the transcript ends before its resolution, the entirety of the episode builds to this point, emphasizing Stewie's profound, almost childlike, love for his bear. This episode provides a rare glimpse into Stewie's emotional core, revealing that beneath his genius and malevolence lies a deep capacity for attachment and a vulnerability that Rupert alone seems to access. It humanizes Stewie in a way few other episodes do, making his quest for Rupert a poignant, albeit absurd, journey of love and loss. Stewie's profound attachment to Rupert offered a rare glimpse into his emotional depths, a stark contrast to his usual malevolence. Our journey continues with Season 6, Episode 5, an episode that plunges us into the darkest depths of Stewie's ambitions, exploring a terrifying alternate reality where his ultimate plan seemingly succeeds, and revealing the disturbing meta-narrative behind it all. The episode opens with Lois attempting to tell Peter that Stewie tried to kill her, a claim he casually dismisses. Flashbacks reveal Stewie shooting her on a cruise ship, her falling into the ocean, and being rescued by a reverse merman, Fishtop, human bottom, who then makes unwanted advances. Lois, suffering from amnesia, wanders to a summer camp, then a diner, where she meets a young man named Derek. He takes her to a white supremacist meeting, where Lois's objection to the speech is met with a punch that restores her memory. This convoluted backstory, while absurd, emphasizes the relentless and often brutal nature of Stewie's attempts on Lois's life, and her remarkable, almost unbelievable survival. Back in the courtroom, Lois finishes her story, finally convincing Joe Swanson that Stewie is a homicidal baby. However, Stewie has vanished, prompting Joe and Peter to vow to catch him. The search takes them to various absurd locations, including Superman's Fortress of Solitude, where they question Consuela, his housekeeper. Upon returning home, the Griffin family finds Stewie waiting with a gun. He holds them hostage, forcing Peter to admire his macaroni art of an owl, a chilling display of his control. When Joe knocks on the door, Stewie forces Brian at gunpoint to insult Joe, calling him handsome, only to retract it, leaving Joe confused and then disappointed. This scene perfectly showcases Stewie's manipulative cruelty, using Brian as a puppet to inflict emotional pain. With the family tied up, Stewie orders Lois to breastfeed him, then forces Brian to taste the milk first, a deeply disturbing and perverse act that highlights his desire for absolute control over Lois, even in the most intimate and humiliating ways. Cleveland Brown then opens the door and is immediately shot by Stewie, falling to the ground. The family reacts in horror, with Peter trying to comfort Lois by saying Cleveland is in heaven, where he is seen arguing with St. Peter about a credit card policy. This sudden, casual murder of a beloved recurring character is a shocking moment, demonstrating the extreme lengths Stewie is willing to go to in his pursuit of power. Stewie then takes Brian hostage, dragging Cleveland's body with them in a Toyota Prius and driving away. Brian, still under duress, is forced to insult Joe again as they pass him. Stewie reveals his plan for world domination, flashing back to a humiliating American Idol audition where Simon Cowell told him he wanted to shoot him in the face. This explains Stewie's underlying motivation for revenge and control, a deep-seated insecurity stemming from artistic rejection. Back at the Griffin house, the family, surprisingly untied, decides to start a rumor about Rob Schneider, a bizarre distraction from the severity of their situation. Meanwhile, Stewie accidentally discharges his gun, causing Brian to crash the car. The family searches Stewie's room, where Lois discovers a hidden door to a massive armory. Peter, marveling at the weapons, accidentally activates a device that switches his and Lois's minds, adding another layer of chaos to the unfolding events. Stewie and Brian arrive at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Stewie, using a laptop, forces Brian to choose an alias, Willem Dafoe, with a flashback showing the actor hiding under Stewie's bed. They sneak through the building, and Stewie begins hacking a computer terminal in a massive server room, explaining his plan to take over the world's power grid. He succeeds, causing lights to flicker off across the globe, including at Tom Cruise's house, where Katie Holmes is freed from a force field. A news report announces Stewie has become the new president of the world. In the Oval Office, Stewie, with Brian present, makes absurd decrees, including that anyone who sees Peter Griffin must throw apples at him. Lois, now a commando, crashes through the Oval Office window, initiating an intense action movie-style fight with Stewie that destroys the office. Peter walks into the burning wreckage, finds Lois and Stewie seemingly dead, and delivers a one-liner before shooting Stewie's body and posing triumphantly. The entire horrifying sequence then freezes, and the words, "Simulation over," appear. The scene pulls back to reveal Stewie in his room, removing a VR headset. Brian enters, and Stewie calmly explains that he was running a simulation to see how his plan to kill Lois and take over the world would play out. They then discuss the meta implications of the episode being a simulation, referencing The Sopranos' ending. This episode is a profound and deeply unsettling exploration of Stewie's ultimate ambitions. The simulation allows the show to depict the full, brutal extent of his sociopathic tendencies, including murder and global domination, without permanent consequences. The casual nature of Cleveland's death and the extreme humiliation inflicted upon Lois highlight the true darkness within Stewie's character. The meta-narrative twist, however, recontextualizes everything. It reveals Stewie not just as a villain, but as a meticulous planner, constantly refining his strategies for matricide and world domination. The reference to The Sopranos' ending is a direct nod to audience expectations and the show's willingness to play with narrative reality, leaving us to ponder how much of what we see is truly real within the Family Guy universe, and how much is simply Stewie's elaborate, disturbing mental exercises. It's a chilling reminder that the greatest threats often come from within, and that even a baby's mind can harbor truly global and utterly terrifying ambitions. The chilling simulation of Stewie's global domination in the last episode left us questioning the true nature of reality within Family Guy. Our journey continues with Season 7, Episode 3, an episode that takes Brian and Stewie on a dark, historical journey to Nazi Germany, raising profound philosophical questions about intervention, responsibility, and the terrifying consequences of altering the past. The episode, titled Road to Germany, begins with a party at the Griffin house. Amidst the usual chaos, including Quagmire filming Meg on the toilet, Mort Goldman, a neurotic Jewish pharmacist, inadvertently stumbles into Stewie's room. Mistaking Stewie's time machine for a porta-potty, Mort enters it, activates it, and vanishes in a flash of blue electrical energy. Stewie, realizing his time machine has been used, immediately understands the gravity of the situation. A flashback to Stewie playing with a European-themed See and Say toy hints at the region Mort might have landed in. Brian and Stewie, accompanied by a musical interlude from Rick Moranis and the backup singers from Little Shop of Horrors, materialize in a green field, arriving in a European-style town square. They soon discover a synagogue with a sign reading, "Hebrew Temple of Warsaw. Bring a sweater. It's chilly inside." Inside, they find Mort at a wedding. A wedding invitation reveals the date. Goldman-Stivik wedding, September 1st, 1939. This date immediately signals the impending disaster, as it marks the beginning of the German invasion of Poland and the start of World War II. As Brian, Stewie, and Mort participate in the horror dance, the German invasion of Poland begins, with tanks and planes appearing. The wedding guests, including the trio, flee the synagogue in terror. This abrupt shift from celebration to wartime horror is a stark and brutal portrayal of historical reality. Brian, Stewie, and Mort take cover and then attempt to escape in a car. Mort, disguised as a priest, helps them navigate a Nazi checkpoint, though a comical interaction with another priest almost gives them away. Their escape turns into a chaotic chase scene, with Stewie on a makeshift skateboard being towed by a Nazi car, eventually rejoining Brian and Mort in a motorcycle sidecar. The pursuing Nazi car is doused in manure, providing a moment of dark humor amidst the peril. The trio then embarks on an arduous montage of travel, eventually overlooking a Nazi naval base. They manage to sneak onto a submarine, leading to an underwater chase and battle where their submarine is struck by a torpedo and sinks to the ocean floor, comically landing beneath a pile of police cars. They eventually resurface near the white cliffs of Dover, finding London in ruins from the Blitz. Back at the site of the destroyed time machine, Stewie discovers the return pad is broken. This forces them to seek out a Nazi laboratory, where Stewie believes they can find the uranium needed to power the time machine and return home. In a truly disturbing sequence, Brian and Stewie don Nazi uniforms and infiltrate the lab. Stewie, disguised as Adolf Hitler, is greeted with fervent "Heil Hitler!" salutes from the scientists. He demands uranium, which a scientist, dressed as Mean Joe Green, tosses to him. However, the real Adolf Hitler soon appears, leading to a tense standoff and a comical mirroring of movements between Stewie as Hitler and the genuine article. Hitler orders his guards to arrest the trio. Just as they are about to be captured, Brian, Stewie, and Mort manage to activate the time machine's return pad, vanishing in a flash of light. They reappear in Stewie's room, safe. However, in a final, mind-bending twist, a second Mort Goldman from the past, still clutching his wedding invitation, also appears in Stewie's room, implying a temporal paradox before the time machine explodes. This episode delves into some of the darkest historical lore imaginable, placing beloved characters in the midst of the Holocaust. The casual presence of Mort Goldman, a Jewish character, in such a dangerous historical setting, and the direct confrontation with Nazi Germany force a deeply uncomfortable reflection on the gravity of their journey. The underlying philosophical question is whether Brian and Stewie, with their knowledge of history, should intervene to prevent the atrocities they witness. Their primary motivation, however, remains personal: to rescue Mort and return home, highlighting the often selfish nature of their adventures, even when faced with monumental historical events. The appearance of the second Mort also introduces a disturbing layer of temporal paradox, suggesting that their intervention, however well-intentioned, may have unforeseen and chaotic consequences, questioning the very fabric of their reality. It's a journey that reveals the terrifying weight of history and the moral complexities of time travel, leaving a lingering sense of unease. The perilous journey through wartime history and the disturbing implications of altering the past left us with a sense of unease. Our journey continues with Season 8, Episode 7, an episode that, while ostensibly a comedic search for a new friend, peels back layers of prejudice, insecurity, and the often toxic interpersonal dynamics that define the residents of Quahog. The episode opens at the Drunken Clam, where Peter, Quagmire, and Joe are mourning the absence of Cleveland Brown, who has moved away. Peter, in a moment of delusional affection, mistakes a floor lamp for Cleveland. Realizing his error, he declares they need a new fourth member for their group. Their search for a replacement is a series of awkward interviews, including a tiny Kevin Connolly and two identical blonde men. This subplot immediately highlights the void left by Cleveland and the friends' desperate, often misguided attempts to fill it, revealing a subtle reliance on familiar social structures. Lois questions Peter about his search for a new friend. Peter explains that Quagmire dislikes Brian, a recurring tension point. In a cutaway gag, Peter and Lois are at a restaurant with another couple where the woman is crying, hinting at the emotional complexities Peter often fails to grasp. Back at the bar, the friends conclude they specifically need to find another black man to replace Cleveland, a moment that subtly exposes their casual, almost unconscious racial bias in their social circles. Enter Jerome, a cool-looking black man with an afro, who expertly wins a darts tournament at the bar, impressing the group. Peter, Joe, Quagmire, and Jerome immediately bond, leaving the Drunken Clam together, seemingly having found their new fourth. However, a deeper, more unsettling layer is revealed when Peter invites Jerome inside his house to meet Lois. Lois immediately recognizes Jerome as her old boyfriend, leaving Peter stunned. Lois attempts to downplay their past relationship, but Peter's jealousy is palpable. This revelation introduces a personal, almost soap operatic, conflict into Peter's seemingly simple quest for friendship, showcasing the complicated histories that intertwine the characters in Quahog. Meanwhile, Brian's own insecurities come to the forefront. He attempts to trick Quagmire into a date, hoping to mend their strained relationship. Brian waits for Quagmire to check his mail, intending to have a coincidental conversation. However, when a disheveled woman emerges from Quagmire's house, Brian makes an inappropriate joke. Quagmire, furious, reveals the woman is his sister and a victim of domestic abuse. A large, angry man then arrives and barges into Quagmire's house, followed by sounds of a violent fight. Quagmire's subsequent angry tirade at Brian for his insensitive comment is a rare moment of genuine emotional outpouring, revealing the depth of his personal pain and the consequences of Brian's thoughtless remarks. This scene, in particular, exposes a dark reality of domestic violence within Quahog, a stark contrast to the show's usual comedic tone. Peter's jealousy over Lois and Jerome's past escalates into a destructive act. He sees Jerome watching TV through his living room window and, misinterpreting the show, angrily throws his beer bottle through the window, shattering a lamp and starting a fire that burns down Jerome's house. Peter, looking on in horror, is overcome with guilt. Lois, unaware of Peter's culpability, offers Jerome a place to stay at their house. Peter's internal conflict is comically represented by a spinning beach ball of death, cursor appearing over his face, signifying a system freeze as he tries to process the situation. Later, in a scene that borders on the incestuous, Jerome performs a series of increasingly suggestive Heimlich maneuver thrusts on Lois, ripping off both their shirts in the process, until she coughs up a piece of scone. Peter watches, visibly uncomfortable, while Stewie cheekily references a famous line from When Harry Met Sally. This moment, while played for laughs, further highlights the uncomfortable sexual undertones that often pervade the show's humor. Brian's attempt to reconcile with Quagmire over dinner ends in a devastating failure. Quagmire erupts into a long, angry tirade, listing all the reasons why he hates Brian, before storming out. This scene is a brutal, unfiltered expression of Quagmire's deep-seated resentment, revealing years of unspoken grievances and a profound, almost visceral dislike for Brian. It shatters any illusion of their friendship, exposing the raw, toxic nature of their relationship. Overcome with guilt, Peter apologizes to Lois, presenting her with a garbage sculpture that she explains is an actual prop from Family Ties, and a thoughtful gift from Jerome. Peter then seeks out Jerome at the Drunken Clam and apologizes, leading to a reconciliation. However, Jerome makes a final cryptic confession to Peter about Meg, the content of which is not revealed in the transcript, but leaves an unsettling ambiguity. The episode concludes with Brian, dejected after his failed night with Quagmire, seeking comfort from Stewie. Stewie, in a rare moment of tenderness, invites Brian to sleep in his room. In the darkness, a loud farting sound is heard, a final crude reminder of the show's characteristic humor, even in moments of emotional depth. This episode is a deep dive into the complex and often dark interpersonal dynamics of Quahog. It exposes casual prejudice, unchecked jealousy, and the devastating consequences of thoughtless actions. The raw animosity between Brian and Quagmire, the disturbing implications of Jerome's past with Lois, and Peter's destructive jealousy all contribute to a portrait of a community deeply flawed and often unsettling. It challenges the notion of easy friendships and reveals the painful, often unspoken truths that lie beneath the surface of seemingly simple relationships, leaving us to ponder the intricate and often uncomfortable web of connections that bind these characters. The complex web of relationships and the unsettling display of prejudice in the previous episode revealed the darker undercurrents of Quahog. Our journey continues with Season 9, Episode 11, an episode that plunges into the disturbing depths of Chris Griffin's vulnerability and his unsettling relationship with a seemingly benign, yet ultimately sinister exchange student. The episode opens with the Griffin family engaging in typical household antics, highlighting their dysfunctional normalcy. A hardened blue blanket shatters, and Chris's crusty clothes fall off, leaving him naked, a visual gag that foreshadows his eventual stripping down of innocence. Peter, in a moment of extreme boredom, pulls out a gun and shoots himself in the head, splattering blood on Chris. This dark, quick cutaway serves as a chilling reminder of Peter's casual disregard for life and the casual violence that often permeates their world. Chris, left alone on the sidewalk by a very drunk Peter, stumbles upon a grand opening Quahog puppet store. Inside, he is greeted by an elderly man with a German accent, Franz, who makes a wooden marionette in Chris's image, dressing it in his clothes and drawing on its face. Chris, delighted, watches the puppet dance to Der Kommissar. He even controls two other puppets, parodies of Twilight characters. This innocent interaction, however, is being observed by Herbert, who looks through the window, horrified, hinting at a darker truth. Herbert, the Griffin's elderly neighbor, approaches Peter and Lois, expressing his concerns about Franz. Herbert then has a disturbing flashback to World War II. He, an American pilot, is shot down, captured by German soldiers, and taken to the Dachau concentration camp. There, a sadistic Nazi officer, who looks like a younger Franz, forces Herbert to sort recyclables, laughing at his sticky hands. This revelation is a truly dark and shocking piece of lore, revealing Franz as a former Nazi officer and turning Herbert's usual predatory nature towards Chris into a deeply personal, historical vendetta. Herbert confronts Chris, attempting to warn him about Franz, but Chris, disbelieving, hugs Franz and goes inside his house, leaving Herbert dejected. Peter is later invited to dinner at Franz's house. While there, Chris discovers a hidden room filled with Nazi memorabilia and a nameplate that reads LT Schlechtnacht. The truth dawns on Chris as Franz holds Peter at gunpoint, revealing his true, sinister identity. Peter and Chris are tied up in the basement, where Franz taunts them. Chris, still in a state of delusion, believes he is a puppet and is easily manipulated by Franz, a heartbreaking portrayal of his naivete and mental fragility. Franz then chillingly declares that he must kill them. From a small window in the basement, Peter and Chris spot Meg walking by and yell insults at her, a moment of dark humor that highlights Meg's perpetual victimhood, even in the face of mortal danger. They then spot Herbert walking his old dog, Jessie, and Chris yells for help. Jessie alerts Herbert, who finally realizes Chris is in trouble. Herbert, now fully aware of the danger, prepares for battle, donning his old army uniform in a dramatic montage. He bursts into Franz's house, and the two old men, former adversaries, engage in a long, stylized fight sequence, referencing various action movies. They fight slowly with walkers and canes, exchanging blows until Herbert finally pushes Franz out of the house. Franz falls in slow motion, is briefly lifted by pigeons, and then crashes to the ground, dead. Herbert then gives Franz a German funeral by pushing his body into an oven and turning it on, a grim and historically resonant act that underscores the lingering trauma of World War II. Chris and Herbert share a moment of reconciliation, with Chris hugging Herbert. However, the episode ends with Meg running up to Peter, complaining that Herbert called her Thunder Thighs, and Peter, with casual cruelty, thanks Herbert. This episode is a deep, disturbing dive into the psychological vulnerability of Chris Griffin and the lingering shadows of history. It transforms Herbert from a creepy old man into a tragic hero, scarred by a past in a Nazi concentration camp. The revelation of Franz as a former Nazi officer is a chilling piece of lore, confronting the audience with the real-world horrors of the Holocaust through the lens of a sitcom. Chris's childlike innocence and susceptibility to manipulation, combined with Peter's casual cruelty and Meg's unending suffering, create a narrative that is both darkly comedic and profoundly unsettling. It explores themes of historical trauma, the corruption of innocence, and the enduring nature of evil, reminding us that even in the absurdity of Quahog, real darkness can lurk just beneath the surface. The previous episode's journey into Chris's vulnerability and the dark echoes of history left us with a lingering 10, episode 17, which delves into a complex, multi-layered narrative of identity, betrayal, and the disturbing depths of Quagmire's character, pushing the boundaries of what we thought we knew about these familiar figures. The episode opens with the usual Griffin household chaos, where Peter and Brian attempt to sneak out for a night of laser tag, much to Lois's chagrin. At the laser tag facility, Peter's competitive nature shines through as he comically and somewhat aggressively eliminates enemies and destroys the world, according to a fake newspaper article he later frames. This early scene establishes Peter's childish exuberance and his tendency to exaggerate his own achievements, a trait that will soon be tested. In a dark cutaway, Peter and Lois are at a zoo, where a gorilla is shown gently holding a kitten, only for the camera to reveal a large, bloody pile of previously held, torn-apart kittens, a disturbing visual that contrasts innocent appearances with brutal reality, a theme that subtly underpins the entire episode. The primary narrative thrust begins when Peter, Brian, Joe, and Quagmire are driving at night and are engulfed by a blindingly bright light. They wake up in an empty hospital room, all wearing gowns and suffering from amnesia. The entire town is deserted, creating an eerie, post-apocalyptic atmosphere. This collective amnesia forces the characters to embark on a quest for their identities, leading to a series of comedic yet revealing cutaway gags parodying other TV shows, as they try to piece together who they are. As they wander through the deserted streets, they find clues to their past lives. Peter thinks his name is Earl. Quagmire is associated with a Danish cookie company. Brian believes he was a presidential speechwriter, and Joe, disturbingly, discovers he was both a police officer and a stripper. These fragmented memories paint a picture of their lives that is both absurd and, in Joe's case, unexpectedly perverse. Upon regaining their memories in Peter's living room, a shocking realization hits Joe and Quagmire. They notice the framed newspaper article on the wall, proclaiming Peter Griffin eliminates enemies and destroys world. Believing Peter to be an evil alien, they arm themselves with shotguns and confront him. Brian, in a moment of unwavering loyalty, jumps in front of Peter to protect him and is shot, collapsing as Peter cries over his body. This moment of selfless sacrifice from Brian underscores the depth of his friendship with Peter, even in the face of what appears to be ultimate betrayal. However, the entire terrifying sequence is then revealed to be a simulation. Brian jolts awake on a cot with wires attached to his head, in a room with Stewie. Stewie calmly explains that he created the simulation to test Brian's friendship with Peter, revealing his manipulative genius and his penchant for elaborate psychological experiments. He shows Brian monitors displaying the simulation, including another where Lois, Meg, and a woman resembling Bonnie are fighting in a hospital room, hinting at other, equally bizarre, alternate realities. The meta-narrative of this episode is truly profound. By presenting a seemingly real, catastrophic event, and then revealing it as a simulation, the episode forces the audience to question the very nature of reality within Family Guy. It's a commentary on narrative expectations and the show's willingness to subvert them. Stewie's motivation to test a friendship is both simple and incredibly complex, showcasing his capacity for both genuine curiosity and ruthless experimentation. But the episode's deepest, most disturbing lore lies in the implications of these simulations. If Stewie can create such vivid, emotionally impactful alternate realities, how many other events in the show's history might also be simulations? This raises unsettling questions about free will, destiny, and the potential for Stewie to be an unseen puppet master, orchestrating the lives of those around him for his own entertainment or psychological research. The glimpse into Joe's stripper past, even if a simulated memory, adds a layer of unexpected perversion to a character usually portrayed as a straightforward, if sometimes exaggerated, police officer. It suggests that even the simulated subconscious can reveal deeply unsettling truths about a character's hidden desires or potential. This episode is a masterclass in meta-commentary and psychological depth. It exposes the fragile nature of memory and identity, the unwavering loyalty of friendship, and the disturbing power of one character to manipulate reality itself. The casual portrayal of violence and the unsettling implications of Stewie's simulations leave us pondering the true extent of his control and the blurry lines between reality and illusion in the chaotic world of Family Guy. It's a journey that challenges our understanding of the show, making us question everything we thought we knew. The mind-bending simulations of the previous episode challenged our perception of reality, hinting at a world where even the most dramatic events could be an illusion. Our journey continues with Season 12, Episode 6, an episode that delivers a genuine, emotionally jarring shock by confronting the unexpected and devastating death of a core character, Brian Griffin, and the family's struggle to cope with the profound loss. The episode opens with Brian and Stewie on the run from Native Americans, a consequence of Stewie's past self giving them guns in an earlier timeline. They eventually escape into the past, where Stewie's past self is seen flirting with a Native American woman, a casual act that has far-reaching, unforeseen consequences. Present Stewie, realizing the temporal paradox, drops the return pad, and they are transported back to their original timeline, barely escaping a hail of arrows. Upon returning to his room, Stewie, in a rare moment of profound realization and maturity, decides to dismantle and destroy his time machine. He explains to a shocked Brian that he's getting rid of it because it's too dangerous, leading to a poignant scene at a junkyard where the machine is crushed. This decision marks a significant turning point for Stewie, signaling a potential shift away from his usual reckless scientific endeavors and a newfound, albeit temporary, sense of responsibility. Brian, visibly sad, suggests they take a street hockey net from the junkyard and play. However, a moment of tragic irony strikes. As Brian sets up the net in the street, a silver car speeds down the road and hits him, mangling him and leaving him bleeding on the asphalt. Stewie watches in horror, utterly devastated. The entire Griffin family rushes out to find Brian fatally injured. A squirrel even runs up and kicks Brian, adding a final, darkly comedic, and cruel insult to his impending death. At the Quahog veterinary clinic, the family gathers, visibly distraught. Dr. Hartman delivers the grim news. Brian's injuries are too severe, and he won't survive. In a truly heartbreaking scene, Brian, heavily bandaged on the operating table, says his last words, expressing his love and gratitude to the family before the heart monitor flatlines. The family cries over his body, and the vet confirms his death. This raw, unfiltered portrayal of grief is a stark departure from the show's usual comedic tone, forcing the audience to confront the very real emotional impact of losing a beloved character. The family returns home, consumed by sadness. Stewie, in a fit of anger and grief, breaks his hockey stick and throws the net in the trash, symbolic of his shattered hopes and the loss of shared moments with Brian. He then has a moment of realization, hinting at his desire to reverse the tragedy. A funeral is held for Brian in a cemetery, attended by many characters from Quahog. Peter's absence is explained by Chris, who says Peter is engaging in various avoidance behaviors, like being a rich guy in a limo or an old platoon mate, and even dressed as a woman across the street, unable to face the reality of Brian's death. Lois delivers a heartfelt eulogy, and Peter eventually joins, giving his own tearful tribute, showcasing his deep, albeit often hidden, affection for Brian. Stewie, in a moment of profound sorrow, drops a single rose into the open grave. The family struggles to move on. Lois suggests getting a new dog, much to Stewie's anger. They visit Quahog Pets, where Peter encounters a new dog named Vinny, an Italian-American dog with a thick accent. Vinny immediately establishes himself with the family, cooking for Lois, bonding with Chris and Meg, and sharing laughs with Peter. Stewie, however, remains angry and resentful of Vinny's presence, seeing him as a replacement and an intrusion on Brian's memory. Vinny, despite his initial brashness, attempts to connect with Stewie. He confronts Stewie's attitude, and later, after Stewie tries to prank him with a skunk, Vinny finds Stewie crying on the grass. In a poignant and unexpected moment of emotional depth, Stewie confesses that he's crying because he misses Brian. Vinny, in turn, comforts Stewie, sharing a story about his own past loss, that of his owner, Leo. This shared experience of grief forges a genuine connection between them. Stewie, feeling a little better, hugs Vinny, and they become friends. The episode concludes with Vinny jumping into Stewie's crib, a symbol of their burgeoning friendship and Vinny's acceptance into the family. However, in a final unsettling moment, a witch appears in the doorway, a bizarre and unexplained visual that adds a touch of mystery and unease to the otherwise emotional ending. This episode is a pivotal and truly disturbing piece of Family Guy lore, as it commits to the shocking death of a main character, Brian Griffin. It explores the raw, unfiltered emotions of grief, loss, and the struggle to move on. Stewie's journey, from the destruction of his time machine to his profound sorrow and eventual acceptance of Vinny, reveals a depth of character rarely seen. The abruptness of Brian's death, the family's genuine mourning, and the subtle hints of Stewie's desperate desire to reverse time all contribute to a narrative that is both heartbreaking and deeply unsettling. It forces the audience to confront the fragility of life, even in a cartoon world, and the enduring impact of loss on those left behind. The shock and grief of Brian's death in the last episode were a profound moment of emotional gravity for the series. Our journey continues with Season 12, Episode 8, an episode that directly confronts the aftermath of that loss, delving into the complex implications of time travel and the desperate alteration of fate to bring Brian back. The episode opens during Christmas, with the Griffin family watching a dark parody of Home Alone, where the child protagonist is brutally shot and killed by the robbers. This grim opening sets a tone of unexpected violence and a subversion of holiday cheer, reflecting the underlying sadness within the family following Brian's death. The family attempts to celebrate Christmas at the Quahog Mall, which is surprisingly undecorated. Peter, in a flashback, is shown comically pretending to be a wealthy customer at Tiffany & Co., while wearing paper towel wrappers on his feet, highlighting his superficiality, even in moments of aspiration. At the mall, the family discovers the Christmas carnival has been canceled. Stewie, still reeling from Brian's death, is visibly upset, and Vinny, the new family dog, tries to comfort him. Vinny suggests Stewie bother a cologne salesman, showcasing Vinny's more street-smart, pragmatic approach to problem-solving. Lois confronts a security guard about the canceled carnival, but it is Vinny who eventually reveals that Carter Pewterschmidt, Lois's father, canceled it because he hates Christmas. Peter, determined to restore the carnival, attempts to help Carter find his Christmas spirit. This leads to a bizarre parody of A Christmas Carol, where Peter, as Santa, encounters a boy who asks if his cookies are gluten-free, a modern twist on classic holiday narratives. In a particularly unsettling moment, Peter and Lois look out the window and see Santa on a neighbor's roof, but it's actually Stewie with a device. A massive explosion occurs, turning the neighborhood into a fiery, post-apocalyptic wasteland, with Stewie, now wearing goggles, standing in the ruins. This fleeting glimpse into Stewie's destructive capabilities is a stark reminder of his latent power, even in moments of grief, and suggests his scientific endeavors can still cause widespread chaos. Peter's attempts to rekindle Carter's Christmas spirit are met with resistance. Carter gets angry when Peter includes an embarrassing fact about him buying a stool for his testicles in a Christmas letter. Peter also tries to force-feed Carter eggnog. During this time, the original Brian briefly walks by, unnoticed by Peter, who dismisses him as a different dog, a subtle moment of dramatic irony that foreshadows the core of the episode. At the now decorated Quahog Mall Christmas Carnival, Stewie sits on Santa's lap, expressing his profound sadness. He tells Santa all he wants for Christmas is his friend Brian back, who is dead. Stewie cries on Santa's lap, a raw and honest display of his grief, with Vinny looking on sadly, empathizing with his new friend. In a pivotal turn, Vinny attempts to cheer Stewie up, reading from Brian's book, Wish It, Want It, Do It, and presenting his own version, Wish It, Want It, You Blew It. While at a toy store with Vinny, Stewie sees his past self from an earlier timeline. He quickly realizes that his past self has the time machine return pad, the very device he destroyed after Brian's death. Stewie devises a plan to steal the return pad. Vinny distracts past Stewie by pretending to be a model scout, while present Stewie stealthily retrieves the device. In a poignant moment in the toy store's back room, Stewie explains to Vinny that saving Brian means he and Vinny will never have met. They share a heartfelt goodbye, and Stewie activates the time machine pad, disappearing into the past. Stewie appears on the street just as the car is about to hit Brian. He heroically pushes Brian out of the way, saving him. The car hits the inflatable hockey net instead. Stewie, relieved, hugs Brian, but as he explains he came from the future, he begins to fade away, his timeline being erased. He fully disappears, along with the time machine pad, as his intervention has altered the past, preventing the very circumstances that led to his friendship with Vinny. The time machine pad reappears in past Stewie's backpack, and past Stewie, with no memory of the encounter, looks confused. The episode concludes with Brian and Stewie back in front of their house, with Brian having no memory of the events that transpired. Stewie, in a moment of complex emotion, hits Brian in the groin with a hockey stick, a return to their usual dynamic. On Christmas morning, Brian gives Stewie a framed photo of the two of them with a plaque that says, Friends Forever, a heartfelt gesture that underscores the enduring bond that, unbeknownst to Brian, was almost permanently severed and only restored through Stewie's selfless act. This episode is a profound exploration of grief, sacrifice, and the complex nature of time travel. Stewie's desperate quest to save Brian, even at the cost of his friendship with Vinny and his own existence in the altered timeline, reveals a deep, abiding love for his best friend. The episode delves into the emotional weight of loss and the moral implications of altering fate, leaving us with a sense of the fragility of connections and the powerful, often unseen, forces that shape our lives. It's a journey that blurs the lines between timelines, highlighting the enduring power of friendship and the sacrifices made for those we cherish. Stewie's profound act of sacrifice to save Brian in the last episode underscored the emotional core of their friendship. Our journey continues with Season 13, Episode 14, an episode that plunges into the chaotic depths of Peter Griffin's desperate quest for intimacy and the profound, often tragic, psychological needs that drive his actions, all while his friends grapple with their own existential crises. The episode opens with Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe at the Drunken Clam, a familiar setting for their misadventures. Peter then spots a billboard announcing McRib is back, and, in a moment of primal craving, frantically drives home. His excited entrance and subsequent rallying of the family to go to McDonald's highlight his childlike impulsiveness and his immediate gratification-seeking nature. Back at the bar, the four friends are talking when a group of people in retro athletic wear enters. Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe then find themselves by the side of the road, arguing in front of a giant billboard advertising Zesto Pudding. Peter, in his usual reckless fashion, climbs the billboard. While he climbs, Cleveland pulls out moisturizer, and the other three use it, a bizarre and humorous detail. Peter reaches the top, stands on the arm of the giant man in the ad, and falls into the giant bowl of pudding, from which he emerges holding a small, disheveled boy. Joe recognizes the boy as the missing Nicholson kid. This accidental heroism thrusts Peter into the public spotlight. Peter, initially having dark thoughts about killing infants during band practice, eventually becomes a local hero. At a ceremony at Quahog Town Hall, Mayor West presents Peter with a giant key to the city. Peter gives a speech, which deeply moves Joe Swanson. This moment of public recognition and Peter's seemingly heartfelt words trigger a profound shift in Joe. Joe, inspired by Peter's speech and perhaps by a surge of unaddressed emotional issues, calls his chief and quits his job. He then tells Bonnie he's leaving her, fires his gun in the air, and wheels away, leaving Peter and Quagmire stunned. This sudden, dramatic breakdown reveals a deep-seated dissatisfaction with his life, a long-simmering crisis of purpose that Peter's accidental heroism inadvertently ignites. Peter, Quagmire, and Cleveland go to visit Joe at his new apartment, which is sparsely furnished, but features an air hockey table and a gun in a glass case. Joe offers them butterscotch candies, displaying a strange, almost childlike detachment from his drastic life changes. His friends express concern, but Joe remains resolute in his newfound chaotic freedom. The four friends decide to go on a road trip to Niagara Falls. Their journey is filled with absurdities, including getting out of the car to tip a cow, which Joe struggles to push over. Peter has an internal monologue about wanting to kiss the cow, and when Cleveland suggests it, Quagmire volunteers, causing Peter to scream. This brief, unsettling moment reveals Peter's latent, bizarre sexual curiosities and his discomfort when they are mirrored by others. At a motel, Joe brings in three goth-looking high schoolers, further demonstrating his erratic behavior and desperate attempts to embrace a new, rebellious persona. Peter tries to tickle Quagmire, a strangely intimate and uncomfortable interaction. At Niagara Falls, Peter throws Lois's Niagara Falls Fund, can, into the falls, a callous act that demonstrates his thoughtless disregard for her dreams and their shared financial goals. Joe then, in a dramatic, almost theatrical gesture, throws himself and his wheelchair over the railing. He is caught on a tree branch, prompting Peter to tell him they are friends and will look out for him, a moment of genuine, albeit fleeting, concern. Joe explains his feelings of worthlessness and his manic episode, revealing the underlying psychological turmoil that led to his drastic actions. Peter tries to cheer him up with compliments, but Joe, in a desperate cry for help, repeatedly jumps over the railing, attempting suicide. A montage shows his friends repeatedly saving him, highlighting their unwavering loyalty despite his erratic behavior. In the climax, they are all riding a cable car over the falls when Joe, still tied up in his wheelchair, causes them to fall out. They dangle from each other, suspended precariously. Joe, in a moment of renewed purpose, uses his wheelchair to zipline along the cable, saving them all. This act of heroism restores Joe's sense of self-worth and purpose. The episode concludes with Joe realizing he has found his purpose again, and he and his friends sing a song together. Peter, however, breaks into Barbie Girl, causing Quagmire to run away, a final comedic jab at Peter's ability to disrupt any sincere moment. Back at the bar, Joe, now in his police uniform, explains his plan to get Bonnie back, signaling a return to his previous life, but with a newfound appreciation for his friends and his purpose. Psychological landscape of Joe Swanson, exploring themes of midlife crisis, depression, and the desperate search for meaning. Peter's accidental heroism serves as a catalyst for Joe's unraveling, highlighting how even seemingly positive events can trigger profound internal struggles. The constant attempts at suicide, though played for dark comedy, reveal the depth of Joe's despair. The episode, through its absurd situations, forces a reflection on mental health, the importance of friendship, and the often bizarre ways individuals cope with feelings of worthlessness. It's a journey that uncovers the hidden vulnerabilities of even the most outwardly strong characters, leaving us to ponder the intricate, often painful, tapestry of their inner lives. Stewie's profound act of saving Brian through time travel and the subsequent erasure of his friendship with Vinny showcase the depths of his loyalty and the complex morality of altering fate. Our journey continues with Season 14, Episode 15, an episode that plunges into the unsettling realm of subconscious fears, digital addiction, and the bizarre, often disturbing, inner workings of the Griffin family's minds. The episode opens with Stewie tossing and turning in his crib, suffering from a nightmare that begins with a psychedelic vortex. In his dream, he's at daycare, naked, being laughed at by other toddlers, and horrified by a grinning shadow monster holding his red overalls. The picture of Lois on her driver's license comes to life, drinks wine, and speaks to him, a manifestation of his subconscious anxieties about his mother. He then finds himself at a lavish dinner party hosted by Glenn Close, who makes a dark joke about boiled rabbit, her face becoming demonic, further unsettling Stewie. This initial sequence immediately establishes the disturbing nature of Stewie's nightmares and his underlying fears. Stewie, terrified, wakes up and climbs into bed with Peter and Lois, seeking comfort. Peter, unable to sleep, pushes Stewie onto Lois and goes downstairs, only to find the couch missing, having gone to Coachella, a music festival for anthropomorphic couches. He settles on the dining room table, where Brian finds him. Peter then recounts a dream of his own, a cutaway gag about being a cartoon character escaping from jail, highlighting his own escapist fantasies. The next morning, a very tired Stewie explains his nightmares to Brian, who, in a rare moment of genuine concern, pledges to help him. Stewie, determined to avoid sleep, imagines working the night shift at a supermarket, where a man buys an excessive amount of cucumbers and takes them home to a person in a gimp suit, a bizarre and darkly humorous cutaway that hints at the strange undercurrents of Quahog's nightlife. Meanwhile, Peter's own form of escapism takes shape as he creates a peat pad, a man cave in the attic. Lois discovers his dirty clothes in the toilet and follows the sound of his voice to the attic, where she finds him playing video games. His friends, Joe, Cleveland, and Quagmire, soon join him, leading to a chaotic fight with pink insulation. Lois, enraged by the mess and their antics, screws the attic hatch shut, trapping them inside, a stark demonstration of her exasperation and Peter's childish irresponsibility. Stewie, still plagued by nightmares, builds a digital dream interface, a large and complex machine designed to allow Brian to enter his dreams and kill the monster causing his nightmares. This invention is a testament to Stewie's genius, but also his desperation to control his own subconscious. Brian, in a moment of scientific curiosity and loyalty, agrees to enter Stewie's dreams. Brian enters Stewie's dream world, which is a surreal landscape of blue, then a lavish dining room with Glenn Close, who now dances the Bristol Stomp. The trapped men in the attic scream for help, but Meg, listening to an audiobook with headphones, doesn't hear them, highlighting her perpetual isolation and the family's obliviousness to her. In the dream, Brian and Stewie journey through Stewie's subconscious, riding in a shopping cart down an aisle of surreal cereal boxes, falling off a cliff, and landing on Dr. Hartman's examination table, where a giant syringe awaits. They encounter a giant, smelly old man's face, are sucked into his mouth, and fall into a surreal maze. They are confronted by creepy strangers offering candy, escape to the desk of a giant Tom Brokaw reporting scary news, and then a petting zoo with naked, censored animals. The Black Shadow monster from Stewie's initial nightmare appears, along with Dr. Hartman wielding the giant syringe. Brian, grabbing the syringe, throws it at the monster, which melts and transforms grotesquely. In a shocking twist, the monster is revealed to be Brian himself. Brian explains that the monster was a manifestation of Stewie's subconscious fear of disappointing him, as Brian is the closest thing Stewie has to a father figure he respects. This revelation is a profound moment of emotional depth, showing Stewie's hidden admiration and fear of failure in Brian's eyes. The dream world dissolves, and they wake up from the machine. Stewie, embarrassed by the sentimentality, dismisses Brian as a weirdo. The men in the attic, after threatening to defecate on Lois's wedding dress, are finally freed by an enraged Lois, falling through the ceiling. Quagmire, disgusted, declares he needs a 2-week break from their friendship. Stewie then finds Lois's wedding dress, covered in feces and vomit, a final grotesque image that perfectly encapsulates the chaotic and often disgusting nature of the Griffin household. This episode is a deep, psychological dive into the subconscious fears and complex emotional landscape of Stewie Griffin. The dream sequences, filled with surreal and disturbing imagery, are a visual representation of his anxieties, particularly his fear of disappointing Brian. The revelation that Brian is his respected father figure adds a profound layer to their relationship, challenging the usual dynamic of master and dog. The episode also critiques digital addiction through Peter's Pete Pad and the broader societal detachment it represents. It's a journey that explores the hidden depths of character, revealing that even the most cynical and brilliant minds harbor vulnerabilities, and that the greatest monsters often reside within our own minds. The journey through Stewie's subconscious nightmares and the intricate web of time travel revealed the profound emotional bond between him and Brian. Our journey continues with Season 15, Episode 1, an episode that explores the complex, often fraught, creative partnership between Stewie and Brian, exposing the jealousy, manipulation, and underlying insecurities that can plague even the strongest of friendships. The episode opens with a darkly comedic parody of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory playing on the Griffin's TV, where Wonka advises Charlie that he has to earn happiness. This sets a tone of underlying cynicism about easy success. Lois, concerned about the content, changes the channel to The Turtlenecks, a psychedelic children's show. Stewie, unimpressed, complains that baby songs don't tackle real baby issues, suggesting that he and Brian should write their own. Brian agrees, and Stewie, in a cutaway gag, is seen in an orange jumpsuit working at a factory, vowing to become a singer despite his co-workers' mockery. This initial setup immediately establishes Stewie's artistic ambitions and his desire for authentic expression. Meanwhile, Chris is struggling to find a job. After recalling a past job where he frantically ran through an airport at the end of a romantic comedy, mistakenly professing love to a grandmother, Peter suggests he become Quagmire's assistant. Chris agrees, inadvertently stepping into a disturbing situation. Stewie and Brian's musical collaboration begins with Stewie playing guitar and Brian on tambourine. Stewie's first song, Mommy and Daddy's Room, is about the sounds of his parents having sex, a provocative choice that appeals to the baby audience at their first gig, a birthday party. However, Stewie's ex-girlfriend Olivia is also at the party, and her presence immediately introduces a layer of romantic and professional tension. Olivia, initially dismissive, later approaches Stewie, telling him he has a date with her, and Stewie, pretending to be sick, ditches Brian. This early manipulation by Olivia hints at her disruptive influence. As Stewie and Brian continue to perform at various children's venues, Olivia's manipulative tactics escalate. At Jump and Fall and Cheesy Charlie's, she subtly suggests that Brian is holding Stewie back, praising Stewie's talent and sweet bod. She even suggests he has all the cool catchphrases, like damn you all and what the deuce. This constant flattery and subtle undermining begin to poison Stewart and Brian's partnership. The friction comes to a head at Cheesy Charlie's, when Olivia explicitly tells Stewie to get rid of Brian, convincing him that he's the real star. Stewie, influenced by Olivia's words, confronts Brian, accusing him of riding his coattails. Brian is confused and hurt, but Stewie, in tears, declares he lost the baby, implying his creative spark is being stifled. Olivia then approaches Brian, not to kick him out, but to propose a new plan. She and Brian should kick Stewie out, and she would take his place. Brian is shocked by her blatant betrayal. At an amusement park, Brian, disgusted by Olivia's treachery, confronts her. He declares, "Red shirt, blue shirt is done," and quits the band, calling Olivia a monster. He compares her to Frankenstein, but not the monster, but Frankenstein when he became a loan officer, a humorous cutaway that highlights the mundane evil of denying loans. Brian then finds Stewie alone on stage and apologizes, admitting he was manipulated by Olivia. Stewie, realizing Olivia manipulated both of them, accepts his apology, and they decide to continue the band as they were. However, the episode then delivers a shocking twist. The previous events are revealed to be a parallel universe, or an alternate scenario. Brian and Olivia are shown on stage at the Quahog Arena, performing Mommy and Daddy's Room. Stewie is in the crowd, watching them, looking utterly betrayed and crying. Backstage, Brian expresses guilt to Olivia, but she dismisses his concerns. Brian, unable to continue, quits the band again, calling Olivia a monster and referencing Frankenstein as a loan officer. In the lobby of the arena, Brian finds Stewie. He apologizes, and they reconcile, agreeing to continue the band as they were. But the episode delivers one final disturbing twist. Olivia is then seen with a new dog partner on stage, who is none other than Vinny, the dog who temporarily replaced Brian after his death in an earlier season. Vinny and Olivia perform a song about getting heartburn from baked clams and other kids' stuff, a crude and cynical continuation of the red shirt, blue shirt concept. This episode is a profound and unsettling exploration of creative ambition, betrayal, and the fragile nature of artistic partnerships. The constant back and forth between Stewie and Brian, their manipulation by Olivia, and the eventual reintroduction of Vinny as Olivia's new partner, create a meta-narrative about character continuity and the cyclical nature of relationships within the show. It highlights how easily friendships can be strained by external influences and internal insecurities. The use of Vinny, a character deeply tied to Brian's temporary death, as Olivia's new partner is a particularly dark and cynical choice, suggesting that characters are interchangeable and that loyalty can be easily replaced. It's a journey that exposes the cutthroat world of entertainment, even in its most innocent forms, and the often painful truths about creative collaboration, leaving us to ponder the true cost of fame and artistic integrity. The intricate dance of creative partnership and the unsettling return of past characters in the previous episode highlighted the cyclical nature of relationships in Quahog. Our journey continues with Season 16, Episode 4, an episode that, through the seemingly innocuous journey of a single-dollar bill, exposes the interconnectedness of Quahog's residents, revealing their strange habits, hidden desires, and the often chaotic consequences of Peter Griffin's fleeting whims. The episode opens with Carter Pewterschmidt preparing a birthday card for his grandson, Chris. He writes a message and, in a moment of characteristic cheapness, includes only a $1 bill as a gift, repeatedly writing "ha ha" before coughing on it. This mundane act sets in motion a long and convoluted journey for this single-dollar bill, becoming the narrative thread that weaves through the episode, connecting various characters and revealing their eccentricities. The dollar's journey begins as Carter mistakenly gives the card to Cleveland Brown, thinking he's a mailman. Cleveland delivers it to Chris at his birthday party, where Chris, disappointed by the meager gift, drops it. Stewie then picks up the dollar, only for Peter to take it from him, giving him a spoon in exchange, a casual act of parental exploitation. Peter then takes the dollar to the Drunken Clam, where he trades it to news anchor Tom Tucker for 100 pennies after a messy drive-thru meal. Tom uses the dollar to tip barista Jillian at a coffee shop. During a massive fight between Lois Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken's wife, Nicole, the tip jar is shattered, and a man named Scott, whose marriage proposal is ruined, picks up the dollar. As Scott flees, a passing motorcyclist snatches the dollar, which gets stuck to his helmet before being discarded and eventually picked up by a pigeon. The pigeon delivers the dollar to the wooden-limbed pirate, Seamus, who writes his phone number on it and gives it to Meg Griffin. Meg then uses the dollar to buy chewing tobacco and a fork at a convenience store. The clerk gives the dollar to Stewie as change for a Charleston chew. Stewie and Brian then take the dollar to a drug den to buy pills for Brian's alcoholism. A shootout ensues. Brian is shot, and the dollar falls from his wound to the floor, where it is taken by a rat. This sequence is a dark and disturbing reminder of Brian's past struggles with addiction and the dangerous underworld of Quahog. The rat brings the dollar to a man at the Drunken Clam, who gives it to Peter for change for a bar game. Peter, in a fit of rage after failing the game, destroys the bar with a lightsaber, causing the scene to reset. In this altered reality, the rat brings the dollar to a nerdy kid selling candy to Jerome, the bartender. The kid leaves the dollar on a park bench dedicated to the late Muriel Goldman, where it blows away in the wind as Seamus and Meg leave the park on a date. The dollar lands on the windshield of Peter's car, then falls onto his driveway. A woman leaving Lois's book club picks it up and gives it to Joe Swanson, who is outside with Bonnie. Joe, in turn, gives it to Seamus for parking meter change, who then gives it back to Meg. Meg and Seamus go to a cabaret club, where Meg gives the dollar as a tip to the performer, Ida, who is Quagmire's transgender parent. Ida takes her tips to a strip club and makes it rain on the dancers. Finally, Carter and Chris arrive at the strip club, looking for the dollar. They discover it's a rare misprint with both Benjamin Franklin and George Washington on the front. Carter lunges for it, but is dismayed to see Seamus's phone number written on it, ruining its collector's value. The episode culminates with a massive group selfie at the strip club, featuring every character who handled the dollar bill, including Peter, Lois, the giant chickens, a T-Rex, and many others, all posing with Ellen DeGeneres. This chaotic gathering underscores the bizarre interconnectedness of Quahog's residents. The episode concludes with the rare, misprinted dollar bill on Chris's bedside table. Lois is seen texting "giant chicken" on her phone, a final, unsettling reminder of her secret, ongoing relationship with Peter's nemesis, even as Peter, half asleep, tells her not to talk to him anymore. This episode is a fascinating, almost sociological exploration of a fictional town, revealing the hidden lives, casual prejudices, and unexpected connections between its inhabitants, all through the journey of a single dollar. It exposes the mundane and the absurd, the hidden struggles of addiction, and the bizarre, sometimes disturbing, romantic entanglements that define Quahog. The meta-narrative of the reset after Peter's lightsaber rampage hints at the show's playful manipulation of its own reality, suggesting that even character actions can be undone. The revelation of Lois's secret texting with the giant chicken is a significant piece of lore, adding a layer of subtle betrayal and ongoing secret conflict within the Griffin household, challenging the viewer's perception of her loyalty and the true nature of her relationships. It's a journey that leaves us with a deeper understanding of the intricate and often unsettling web of life in Quahog. The journey through the dollar bill's chaotic path and the unsettling revelation of Lois's secret texting expose the intricate and often morally ambiguous connections within Quahog. Our journey continues with Season 17, Episode 7. An episode that, while ostensibly a tale of Olympic ambition, provides a rare, yet still fraught, moment of connection between Peter and Meg, ultimately emphasizing her enduring suffering and the family's casual disregard. The episode opens with the Griffin family, minus Meg, on the couch watching TV. Meg enters, dressed in biathlon gear, carrying skis and a rifle. In a darkly comedic cutaway, the Griffin living room is covered in vomit, with the entire family, except Meg, throwing up profusely. Lois enters with chowder, triggering another round of vomiting. Meg walks in, announces she's going to train for the Olympics, and leaves, completely unnoticed amidst the chaos. This immediate dismissal of Meg's aspirations, even in the midst of a family crisis, sets a bleak tone for her journey. Meg later reiterates her Olympic ambitions to the family, who are initially uninterested until she mentions she has a Jeep. Peter's demeanor changes instantly, and the family eagerly agrees to go with her, parodying a Jeep commercial. This highlights Peter's superficiality and his willingness to engage only when there's personal gain or excitement involved, rather than genuine support for his daughter. During the biathlon qualifiers, Peter, in his usual reckless manner, grabs Meg's rifle and skis, immediately trips, and shoots himself in the head, only to get up seemingly fine, a darkly humorous yet disturbing display of his invulnerability and stupidity. The biathlon race begins, with Meg competing against her rival, Lacey Chabert. Meg pulls ahead and crosses the finish line first, securing her victory. At a ceremony at Quahog Town Hall, Meg gets nervous during her speech, and Lois, ever the spotlight hog, takes over, turning it into a moment about herself. This once again sidelines Meg, even in her moment of triumph, reinforcing her role as perpetually overlooked. The family travels to Pyeongchang, South Korea, for the Olympics. In the Olympic Village cafeteria, Stewie and Brian spot figure skater Johnny Weir, who has a split personality with a deep, masculine voice, which he uses to get women. Stewie is smitten with Tara Lipinski, who emerges from Johnny's hat, leading to a romantic fantasy sequence of them ice skating, contrasted with the reality of Stewie immediately falling and injuring himself. Later, in their hotel room, Johnny's aggressive personality takes over, and he throws Stewie out. This subplot highlights Stewie's own romantic aspirations and vulnerabilities, albeit in a more fantastical context. Meanwhile, Peter and Ryan Lochte are passed out on a train in Korea, surrounded by empty beer bottles. Peter is kicked off the train by a Korean conductor with a giant kicking foot and lands in the snow at the North Korean border, surrounded by soldiers. Peter's attempt to fight them off Rambo-style fails, as he is immediately hit by a bird. Lois, discovering Peter's capture from a red-eyed news anchor, parodies La La Land, lamenting his situation. She tells the family about Peter's kidnapping, and Meg, delivering an impassioned speech parodying The Goonies and Encino Man, declares they must rescue him. However, the family, one by one, loses interest and leaves, until only Stewie remains. This is a tragic and telling moment. Even in a crisis, Meg's genuine passion and leadership are met with apathy by her own family. At the biathlon event, Meg stands at the starting line. An official, dressed as Santa Claus, signals for everyone but Meg to start the race, a cruel and unfair act. Meg then reveals a hidden, blurred image to the crowd, causing a man to blush before the race truly begins. Meg skis and shoots her way through a North Korean prison camp, rescuing Peter in a first-person shooter perspective, mimicking the gameplay of GoldenEye 007. This sequence transforms Meg into an action hero, a rare moment of agency and competence for her. The family is reunited outside the Olympic Village, celebrating Meg's heroism. The Korean train conductor appears again, angry about his toilet, and Peter, in a moment of casual cruelty, kicks him in the groin, defeating him. The episode concludes with a narrator explaining that tensions were eased by Dennis Rodman playing basketball with Kim Jong-un. Struggle for recognition and the casual disregard she faces from her family. Her Olympic ambition, her heroism in rescuing Peter, and her impassioned speeches are consistently undermined or ignored by her family, reinforcing her role as the perpetual outcast. The episode uses her journey to highlight themes of unfairness, the struggle for validation, and the painful reality of being overlooked, even when achieving extraordinary feats. The casual violence, Peter's blatant disinterest, and Lois's self-centeredness all contribute to a portrait of a family that, despite Meg's efforts, remains largely oblivious to her emotional needs. It's a journey that, while showcasing Meg's rare moments of triumph, ultimately underscores the deep-seated, systemic suffering that defines her character within the Family Guy universe. Meg's struggle for recognition and the family's casual disregard for her triumphs highlighted the deep-seated dysfunction within the Griffin household. Our journey concludes with Season 20, Episode 5, an episode that, while wrapped in absurd comedic plots, reveals Stewie's deeper emotional vulnerabilities and the complex family dynamics that continue to shape him, even as his relationship with Brian is tested in shocking ways. The episode opens at Duds and Suds, a new laundromat that serves beer, where Peter, Quagmire, and Joe are folding laundry and drinking. Joe points out that Peter and Quagmire have the same underwear, leading to a comedic revelation that Quagmire's plains underwear is for pilots, designed for unexpected wind shear, which Joe equates to farts. This sets a tone of casual absurdity and male bonding through the mundane. Meanwhile, Stewie is in his crib, trying to sleep, but is disturbed by Chris, who is upset that it's Wednesday, his independent study day, when he likes to sleep in. Lois then enters, bringing a stuffed monkey named Chi-Chi, which she reveals was very special to her, and now wants to be special to Stewie. Stewie, talking to Rupert, expresses frustration about Chi-Chi's presence, knowing Lois would be crushed if he threw it out because she has like nothing in her life. This reveals Stewie's surprising empathy for Lois, recognizing her emotional fragility despite his usual animosity. At preschool, Stewie confides in a boy named Doug about his problem with Chi-Chi. Doug, a surprisingly cynical and sophisticated child, suggests they do each other's murders. Stewie kills Doug's cat, Miss Tiggywinkles, and Doug kills Chi-Chi. This dark proposition, a twisted version of Strangers on a Train, highlights Stewie's intellectual capacity for scheming, even in childhood. Peter, having accidentally put on Quagmire's plains underwear, uses this as an excuse to engage in sexually suggestive antics with Lois in the hallway, repeatedly calling her into the other room for breakfast, until they resort to reading. This crude humor underscores Peter's persistent, almost desperate quest for intimacy, and his willingness to use any pretext to engage with Lois. Doug successfully kills Chi-Chi, leaving Stewie shocked, but also impressed. However, when it's Stewie's turn to kill Miss Tiggywinkles, he can't bring himself to do it, stating, "I can't kill a cat, unless you were in the movie musical with Rebel Wilson." This unexpected moment of moral restraint reveals a soft spot for animals, a crack in his usual ruthlessness. Stewie then enlists Brian, who hates him, to kill Miss Tiggywinkles, bribing him with 3 of Lois's sweaty jogging bras. Brian eagerly accepts. Meanwhile, Peter and Quagmire discover they accidentally switched underwear at the laundromat, leading to a horrified realization about their boys being where the others' boys were. This moment, played for maximum comedic discomfort, exposes their latent anxieties about male intimacy and hygiene. Joe, hearing about it, even considers a joke where he and Cleveland switch underwear, but Cleveland rejects the idea. Brian enters Doug's house to kill Miss Tiggywinkles, but Stewie, upon opening the door, finds Brian's dismembered body parts on the floor, implying a brutal and unexpected defeat by the cat. The family is back in the living room, with Lois glad everyone's back in their regular underwear and everything back to normal. Stewie and Brian, now miraculously alive and well, recap their week. Stewie gloats that Brian got your ass kicked by a cat, which Brian downplays as more of a draw. The episode concludes with a truly shocking and meta moment. Stewie, holding a rocket launcher, asks Brian if he wants to end the show with a to-be-continued meme. Before Brian can finish his sentence, Stewie fires the rocket launcher and Brian explodes. A to-be-continued arrow appears on the screen, mimicking the classic meme. This episode is a profound, albeit chaotic, exploration of Stewie's emotional complexity, revealing his unexpected empathy for Lois and his moral limits when faced with animal cruelty. The crisscross murders plot, while absurd, delves into themes of manipulation and dark childhood impulses. The casual, almost perverse, humor surrounding Peter and Quagmire's underwear mix-up highlights the show's willingness to push boundaries. However, the most disturbing piece of lore is the abrupt, violent, and metatextual death of Brian at the very end. This moment, designed as a meme, blurs the lines between narrative and audience expectation, serving as a dark, self-aware commentary on the show's own history of character deaths and its playful, yet unsettling, manipulation of its audience's emotional investment. It forces us to question the stability of the Family Guy universe and the true nature of its characters' existence, leaving us with a lingering sense of unease and the unsettling realization that anything, even the most beloved characters can be exploded for a joke. The conclusion. As we drift to the quiet hum of Quahog, we've journeyed through the deepest, most unsettling layers of the Family Guy iceberg, revealing hidden lore, disturbing theories, and the often tragic undercurrents beneath the surface of this beloved animated series. We've seen Stewie's chillingly sophisticated evil from the very first episode, his relentless pursuit of matricide, and his profound, unexpected vulnerability in his love for Rupert. We've witnessed Peter's bizarre lineage, his reckless disregard for consequences, and his desperate, often misguided quests for intimacy. Remember the chilling simulation where Stewie became president of the world, casually murdering Cleveland and forcing Brian into submission, only for it all to be a meticulously planned psychological experiment? Or the heartbreaking moment Stewie sacrificed his friendship with Vinny, and even his own existence in an alternate timeline, to save Brian, revealing a love that transcends space and time. And who could forget the dark, disturbing journey to Nazi Germany, where Brian and Stewie faced the true horrors of history, or the unsettling revelation of Meg's continuous exploitation and the casual disregard she suffers from her own family. These layers, from the absurd to the truly tragic, weave a tapestry far richer and more complex than a simple sitcom. They expose the hidden depths of character, the profound psychological struggles, and the often uncomfortable truths that define the residents of Quahog. As the familiar sounds of Family Guy fade, we're left with a deeper appreciation for the show's intricate lore, its willingness to explore the darkest corners of the human and canine condition, and the enduring, often unsettling, questions it leaves in its wake. Sweet dreams, and may your own subconscious nightmares be less disturbing than those of Stewie Griffin.